The United States military could stay in Iraq for maybe 100 years, and that would be fine with me. Senator John McCain, Republican presidential candidate.
Welcome back to Inside Iraq. We are discussing the intended agreement between Iraq and the United States for stationing troops in Iraq, perhaps for decades to come, with Asad Abu Khalil and General Richard Myers. General Myers, what would be the role played by U.S. troops in Iraq? Some say it's going to be for internal repression, i.e. if an Iraqi general wanted to overthrow any government, the Americans will jump in and kick him out. Will that be the sort of things they will do?
No, that's absurd. It'll be a lot what we're doing now, by the way. It'll be going against the al-Qaeda, a very big disruptive threat that we've already talked about inside Iraq, and destabilizing to Iraq and not letting the government of Iraq come to fruition, really, by fomenting all the sectarian violence. The training and equip role of Iraqi forces, you would assume, would continue at some level. I don't think anybody envisions the current level of troops being the level in the future. And by the way, a status of forces agreement doesn't say how many troops. It certainly doesn't say anything about permanent basing. And there is no...
As a general, what do you expect those forces to be? Are we talking about 20,000, 30,000? Are we talking about just some trainers, about 2,000? What are we talking about?
Oh, I think it'll change over time. You know, we're going from 20 to 15 combat brigades here by this July of this year. That's a significant reduction, a lot less than the 160,000 troops that was mentioned earlier. And I think there'd be hope that that could continue lower as long as the levels of ethno-sectarian violence can be held down. But the Iraqi army is fairly capable now, but not capable totally to keep that violence down and let the political process work.
Asad Abu Khalil.
I don't think anybody can answer that at this point. But there is no vision in any of our plans that we're going to have, you know, hundreds of thousands of troops in Iraq for the long haul. This is about a more normal relationship between a sovereign Iraq and a sovereign United States.
Indeed, that is financially not possible, because the economist is saying that if the current level of troops in Iraq will remain, that is going to exacerbate the recession within the United States. But Asad Abu Khalil, do you see the presence of these military forces giving preferential treatment to future American investment and oil companies?
I mean, it already is. If one reads the memoirs of Paul Bremer, among many others, we know that the Iraqi puppet council that was set up by the occupation was in fact requested to pass certain laws dealing with economic issues, dealing with the inability of Iraqis to sue U.S. troops who continue to commit violations of international law and the rules of war. And General Myers cannot use the word normal. We cannot speak about normalcy when a country occupies another country, no matter how much one tries to beautify it. We cannot say China can occupy Pakistan and then establish normal relations and set up some troops there.
I would like the general to answer that, Asad Abu Khalil, because that goes to the very heart of the issue. General, the overarching negative cloud over this entire process is that the war was deemed illegal by Kofi Annan. There was no second resolution from the United Nations. So anything that is based upon that illegality is somehow null and void.
Well, the United Nations Security Council, of course, is the auspices with which we are currently in Iraq, and that certainly has legal standing. And I don't think I want to go back to the beginning of all this. This, as a professor says, this is a continuous process. Iraq clearly is not a totally normal nation yet, but it's on a path to becoming a normal nation, and there's going to be fits and starts. And I think this is just one more step where we're pulling away from this Chapter 7 authorization to be in Iraq to a status of forces agreement, which is a much more normal, I hate to use the term now because it seems to be pejorative, but a more normal way. And I'll correct one other thing the professor said.
It is pejorative. And in fact,
I was there. I was there when the decision was made when the Iraqis were electing their government, and of course the United States had several options, and that is to pick somebody and try to help them with advertising and so forth. President Bush's mandate to the United States government was very clear: keep your hands off. This is Iraqi business. Let them select their leaders. I don't think anybody would have thought that anybody in the United States would have thought that Prime Minister Maliki would have been our first choice, but it was the Iraqis' choice.
Well, I mean, what he's just said is quite untrue on more than one grounds. The first thing is, I mean, unwittingly, he revealed the colonial nature of this enterprise by saying that the Iraqi is not a nation yet, and it may be in the future. So who will decide whether Iraq is ready for independence? General Myers,
what I said was normal. What I said was a normal nation.
Self-determination. One second. General Myers, let me finish. General Myers, this is a question over self-determination that was settled over a century ago. We are not going to bring back colonial arguments in order to justify American military occupation of a sovereign country. The second point is we cannot give credit to George W. Bush about elections. The credit goes to the Iraqi people themselves. Because let us not fool the audience here. We all are aware that American plan for Iraq did not envisage elections. They envisaged caucuses. And in fact, if you read the book by Ali Allawi, a former Minister of Defense inside Iraq, the Americans were very keen on having caucuses, basically to design and select their own puppet representatives. It was a grand ayatollah from some previous century who insisted on free elections, and I don't give him credit. I think he just saw what the Iraqi public will not settle for anything short of that. So I will not accept giving credit for the elections in Iraq to the American occupation.
Go ahead, Richard Myers.
Well, I was just going to say, Iraq is a sovereign nation. You can dispute it if you want, but it is a sovereign nation. It has a constitution, has its own government. These are the choices that its government are making. And I didn't say it is not a nation yet or sovereign nation. I said it's on its way to normalcy. And I think that is not a colonial term. There's some normalcy required here.
Let us move on, Richard Myers, if you don't mind. Senator McCain is on record saying that he envisaged perhaps the possibility U.S. troops are going to be in Iraq for perhaps 100 years. He stands 50% chance of being a president. So what will this do to the stability of Iraq, as well as perhaps this will be a second rallying cry for terrorists and for other organizations, let alone the Iraqi resistance, to attack U.S. troops and the people in the front, the Iraqi government?
Well, I think the fact is nobody knows. And so to make predictions is a very dangerous thing. Certainly when I was in government, the goal was not to be there one day longer than we were needed or asked to be there by the Iraqi government. And so to think out 100 years, I mean, I have no idea. Of course, you know, after World War II, U.S. forces and the U.S. government didn't think we'd be in Germany and Japan as long, or after the Korean War. And you know, over 50 years later, we're still on the Korean Peninsula at the request of the Korean government. And we try to reduce our presence, and we've done that. In fact, during my tenure, we reduced our presence in Europe and in Korea quite substantially. But I don't think you can't predict these things, and I don't think I'd make statements that says in 100 years that we're going to still be there.
Asad Abu Khalil, U.S. Congress is a little bit upset with President George Bush for being sidelined. The administration says this is an agreement, this is not a treaty, so it falls beyond the pale of the oversight and the supervision of Congress. Do you see the distinction between agreement vis-a-vis a treaty?
I mean, why should that surprise me? The President of the United States is playing a game with language regarding American law, and he has circumvented international law, and he has circumvented some of the laws of the United States in the violation of civil liberties ever since September 11. So nothing of that sort surprises me. I think what is quite disappointing is that the opposition in Congress
there is a question of financing the troops' presence, Asad Abu Khalil. That's what lies at the anger of the U.S. Congress. But
they will not use it because they know this is an election year, and everybody will rally around the troop, and everybody is afraid of being accused of not supporting the troops. And this is why we have seen the Democrat contributing to the perpetuation of the deadly violent situation in Iraq. And people forget that people continue to die in Iraq. And the independent newspaper just this morning had a long article about the toll. This is not mentioned in U.S. press, of course. The toll that this occupation is taken on the civilian population of Iraq. Yes, the Al-Qaeda terrorists are killing Iraqi civilians, but so are U.S. troops. Now, of course, you can say unwittingly, but what kind of sovereignty we talk about when U.S. fighter jets still fly and bomb over in Iraq? This is a sovereign nation we're talking about? I mean, by any rule, by what law we can say that this is a sovereign nation, we're doing that? And I think that I am reminded with this language that they are not ready to have full control and the troops are not ready yet. This is the kind of language the United States used about
South
Vietnamese government.
But there is a possibility, Asad Abu Khalil.
And we saw what happened eventually.
Richard Myers, the president from the podium within the United Nations says, you know, we are going to be in Iraq, but anytime an elected government comes to this august hall, the United Nations, and ask us to leave, we will leave. Do you see that, after spending so much money and so much life loss, the U.S. simply is going to pack and leave?
When President Bush says that, my belief is he absolutely means it. And I mean, the fact is, Iraq is a sovereign nation. We're there at their request. The missions that we fly, the things we do on the ground are at their request. We're not there in a heavy-handed way, although, of course, we are a military force, and military force is a blunt instrument. It's not the best instrument here. We're skirting around the real issue. The real issue is not troops, it's not military. It's not, the U.S. military is not going to make a success out of Iraq. What's going to make a success out of Iraq is Iraqi political progress, and there's been too little of that lately, and I think some of the nation states in that region could help if they wanted to.
Richard Myers, thank you very much. Asad Abu Khalil, the general gave President Bush the benefit of the doubt. Do you do the same?
I do not, because we've seen the record, and I think it doesn't bode well for the future of Iraq. And it's true, the Iraqis should have the opportunity to chart their own self-determination and independence, but they are not being allowed, not only by the foreign fighters that we keep hearing about, but also by the foreign U.S. troops.
Professor Asad Abu Khalil, Professor of Political Science at California State University, and retired General Richard Myers. Gentlemen, thank you for being guests on Inside Iraq. To send us your comments and to access the show, please go to aljazeera.net/English. That's all the time we have for this week. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Goodbye.